Hello, welcome. I am so happy to go over again some really wonderful questions from the community, and I have a lot of them. So we're going to get through what we can so I can be really thorough in my responses, and we'll go from there. Type anything that you want to expand on or hear more about or have additional questions on in the chat too. Or if you want to add a question, I'll do my best there as well. But let's just dive into it. Um, okay, so the first question was around loss and the experience of beginning to wake up and recognizing when you haven't been choosing yourself in a relationship and when you've been choosing partners that actually can't meet your needs, and you're beginning to recognize why you've been settling for last or for less, and why fear has been leading so intensely, and kind of the feelings that are attached to choosing oneself, the fear, the anxiety, the uncertainty, the abandonment wound that is so active. How do you sort of stay true to what you ultimately know deep down inside is the right path for you, but can create such an overwhelming pain response in the moment? And I think this is true not just for grief, but for any situation where you experience anxiety or fear or insecurity or low self worth, and any of those things in relationship. Um, Anxiety wants us to kind of direct outward, and it wants us to really look at the environment around us for those safety cues. And so it makes sense, if we are choosing to approach our life in a new direction, that there would sort of need to be this dropping off where we're settling in a different way. But our go to is going to be what we've practiced most of our life, which is looking externally for that feedback. Am I safe? Am I loved? Am I cared for? Am I being considered? Are they in a good mood? Am I getting positive validation from them? The tendency can be really to look outward and to focus in on certain behaviors from the other person to feel a sense of okayness and to feel a sense of safety. If you want to kind of talk about this in masculine feminine terms, it's a focus on others, which of course is masculine, right? It's like this idea of directing energy outward. And so to begin our own healing process, I can't say this enough times because it's the most simple but profound practice of turning in. You'll even notice this in a dynamic where you're feeling tension in a relationship, or you're feeling tension on a date. It can really be anything, where you're kind of trying to keep it going or keep it interesting. Maybe there's a belief system that all of this falls on you. There's all these kind of hidden and sneaky beliefs that can creep in, that it's your job to keep it alive. It's your job to keep it interesting and keep him excited and keep him motivated. But when we take all of that and we just let it be, and we direct our attention inward to our experience, what am I doing right now? Where's my breath? Where's my rhythm? Where am I holding intention inside of me? Where am I self-abandoning? And we just even start to relax our shoulders and kind of just soften our body. We're bringing the attention in to ourselves. And now, of course, this creates an energetic shift, right? And this doesn't matter if he's there physically or if he's from far away. There is something so powerful in that energetic shift of when we get our focus off of that external, right? And we really begin directing it to ourselves and what our inner experience is. So we're not self-abandoning. This is a really, really powerful practice that starts to make the other person kind of curious, like, like what's going on here? What is she doing? He starts to like want to lean in to fill in that space of you taking care of yourself in the environment. Like, how can I get to know her more? There's something that starts to unfold and open in him through this pressure release, because now you're doing what you need to be doing, taking care of yourself and surrendering the rest. And in that opens up a curiosity in the other to lean in towards you. and to start taking those steps. And we're not doing this to get something. We're doing this because it feels so right and good within us to self-soothe, to show up, to not self-abandon, to trust ourselves that we are not going to settle for less than what we deserve because it will allow us to avoid discomfort in the moment. And, having those sort of ritual practices too, I think, because if we're feeling a lot of uncertainty in our life, it's really important to cultivate certainty, right? We need a balance. And so, what practices are you turning to in your life that invite uncertainty? It could even just be breath. It could just be certain postures or certain stretches or certain walk or a certain cup of tea, things in your life you can count on. It's not the time if you're dealing with a lot of anxiety and stress to like go do something brand new, because you already have such an imbalance of uncertainty that we want to really draw that balance in. Let's see. I see some questions in the chat. I'll get to those. I want to answer a few that were sent to me first, and then I'll speak back to those. Or maybe I'll mix it up. This one was, Dear Jen, I have a question. How do we deal with the fear of aging? Physically or mentally? Like what aspect of aging? Let me know. I think that aging, though, depending upon how old any of you are watching this, it's something, especially for women, that enters our brain. Let's see, physically not pretty anymore. Well, that's a lot of the thoughts that we tell ourselves, and that's a lot of society conditioning, right? So I feel like that's a really interesting thing. Like, it's our responsibility to feel beautiful inside of ourselves, and it's our responsibility to define what beauty is. And are we doing the practices and the things that make us feel our best? That's another one. Like, we can't just say to someone, you should think I'm beautiful, when we don't feel that way about ourselves, right? Or you should love me at any size or any age, if we don't feel that way about ourselves, because of course our partner is going to mirror our belief system and what we believe is possible for us. And not even just our partner, like when we're dating, that energy is going to lead. That energy is going to sort of confirm or deny what we believe about ourselves. And so I think that if you have a fear of aging, it's about first recognizing the beliefs in which you're saying to yourself, like, I don't look good, it's over, I'm too old, or anything that's negative and that isn't rooted in truth or abundance or growth, because that's just the ego trying to protect you, right? And so we start to ask ourselves, like, how is this serving me? And am I doing things in my life that make me feel beautiful? Maybe that is a certain diet or exercise or certain rituals or routines that make you connect to feeling disciplined and feeling like you're prioritizing self-love, which means, of course, that you're making hard decisions in the moment. So it's like you're not making those quick decisions to do something that's going to feel good in the moment, but leave you with a hangover later. So it's like you're practicing that discipline of taking control of what you do have control over. And I know for me, that can often mean just physical movement daily, a little bit of sunshine daily, a healthy diet, a slower pace where I can fit it in, and just time to take care of myself and turn inward and really take care of my inner state. Even just like a hot shower where I have time to spend a little extra time and wash my hair and exfoliate my skin, whatever it may be, those practices that make you connect to taking care of you and changing that dialogue by really being present for yourself in this way. So I think that if you have a negative belief system around the way you look or around physically aging, I think a lot of it is slowing down and not letting that belief system lead, because it truly is our responsibility to step in and reframe that in a world that, is kind of teaching us that until we buy the next product, we're not going to be worthy or good enough. We have to stop that train within ourselves and develop practices that cultivate this beauty and abundance that lives within all of us. So I hope that supports Okay, so the next question I got, and I'll look in the chat periodically too, trying to mix them up. I've got my dog here trying to jump up. Hold on. She's trying to, okay, she's with us now. Let's see, I find myself empathizing with men and their reasons for why they can't commit or show up for me. Am I making excuses for them and abandoning myself and my desires and wants through this? Well, codependency is where we can tend to take on another person's emotional experience, right? Instead of our own. And we start to be like, oh, wow, like they can't help it, or they've got these issues. And wow, I can really understand their point of view. And it's okay to have empathy as long as you're still holding space for your non negotiable needs, right? So it's like you can empathize with their experience, but you're not losing your own. So if they're making this great case, but ultimately it doesn't line up with your non-negotiable needs, then it's still about not self-abandoning and choosing yourself, right? It is so important to stay with your own emotional experience. So it's like, yes, to empathy. Empathy is a beautiful thing, but not to self-abandoning. And if you're becoming so empathetic that your plan and your desires and your truth goes out the window, then now we're kind of entering an unhealthy realm. So it's like being able to be that listener, like, I hear you, or I understand your perspective, yet this is my truth, and it's so important that I hold space for it. This does require boundaries, which is a really, really difficult area for women for so many reasons, because we can't control the outcome once we've set a boundary. We've depended upon men, for years in ways that we don't have to now. And so some of those components do still live within us. And so boundary setting is really a tough thing. It's like, oh my gosh, like, what is this going to mean? Am I safe? Am I okay? But you've got to really be able to think long term about the things that are most important to you. And can I live without this necessary thing for me? And if the answer is no, you can still have empathy, but you still need to honor yourself and have that beautiful balance of not losing yourself in their emotional experience. Because as I've talked with you all about so much in my codependent video and on the last live, if we have some of those codependent tendencies, we automatically go out and look for what that other person is feeling versus staying connected to what is most right and true for us. And this is a practice that you will get better and better at as you increase your awareness. Let's see, I'm going to look at the chat here. Let's see. If your partner breaks up with you, what should I do? I feel so much rejection. Whenever I like to convey my needs to him, he shuts down, and this time he broke up. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. If you're going through a lot of pain with this right now. If your partner breaks up with you, then there's nothing to do. It's about complete stillness. The feminine energy and expressing what we desire and what we need is so often about timing. And so you're not expressing desires generally when a person's shut down or when they are walled up, and you're really being in touch with the energy within the room. Because of course, like, even in my dynamic, if I were to ask my husband or share and express a desire when he's in a bad stress state or a really bad mood, then that's going to be more likely to trigger him. But if he's in a solid space and I'm in like a soft energy where I'm really not attached to the outcome, I'm just sharing like what I want or what I need, but I'm not really attached to a certain response or outcome from him. Well, then that's very different. He may not like do anything with it in the moment, but I can trust that that landed and that he's going to hear that and take it to heart, because I didn't let my ego supersede my ability to kind of read the energy and how that's going to be, just processed by him in that moment. So it's like taking that responsibility to set ourselves up for success. And that means for ourselves, where we're not like trying to force something, and we're setting him up for success by not communicating needs when he's shut down, or needs that sound like a complaint, like he's doing it wrong, right? Like, and that could even look as simple as, just to give you all a sense, it could look as simple as, I'm so happy with all the ways in which you show up in our relationship, yet there's this thing that I really would love to express. Is now a good time, right? So I've shared this before with my kids, like with my youngest son, I have to do like something positive first in order for him to stay open to hear me. But if I go straight into like a sort of negative statement or somewhere where he could improve without acknowledging like how good he's doing or all the positive that I see, then he's much less likely to hear me. And consider this is just human nature, right? We all do better when we're acknowledged for our efforts, and then we speak authentically and honestly to what we need next, right? And we let go of the outcome and the energy and all of the things I just said, right? So I hope that helps. My boyfriend is emotionally unavailable. This was actually a question I got in an email that I was going to get to. So my boyfriend is emotionally unavailable, and every time let me find it because you're kind of cut off. But basically it was about, let's see, sorry, let me get to it. My boyfriend is emotionally unavailable and has no empathy. I was watching a game and I was happy that, her team won the game, and she wanted him to be as excited as, she wanted him to be as excited as she was. And he just wasn't, into it. And this brought about some sadness. In the past, I also was given the silent treatment, and, well, let me speak to the first part, and then, sorry. Oh, okay. So it's basically about the energy of expectation, this one. So let me just speak to the energy of expectation. When we are disappointed with the way in which he's showing up, we are going to create resistance. And so it's about letting him have his emotional experience. He doesn't have to be excited. He doesn't have to be happy. He doesn't have to like it. And being able to truly let go and allow, like, let him just have the experience in which he's going to have. So no masculine energy partner is going to want to feel like you're kind of watching, or you need them to behave a certain way, or the way in which they're showing up isn't satisfactory for you. And so this is going to create a dynamic that, creates a lot of resistance between the two of you. And yeah, I think the point that was raised in the chat here is it goes back to, kind of childhood and not fixing problems. But the other thing with like fixing problems is just make sure that you're not expecting someone to do something on your time frame, because this is never going to lead to the outcome in which you want. If he takes a little bit longer or moves at a different pace, it's not necessarily wrong. It's just not the way you're envisioning it in your head. And that can kind of be a little bit controlling, can definitely come off controlling. And so a man does not like to feel second guessed or micromanaged or questioned. And of course, everything that I talk about in this live with you all is with a man who is overall healthy, like not a toxic dynamic, right? Because as I've said before, if someone is toxic, your masculine energy is going to be kicking in for a reason. But if it's just because you have an idea in your head that it should be going a certain way, or that they should be responding a certain way, I think it's really important to allow them the space to move through it and to see the ways in which they show up. And then if it's kind of like in this situation, it was around how to handle a man who's kind of shut down and giving the silent treatment. I think it is about giving him that space to move through it and taking care of yourself. If it's something that goes on for a really extended period of time, that becomes a bigger conversation of what you need when he's in a space to be able to hear it. I've been through that myself, like being able to say, I recognize your need for space and I want to support that. Yet when space is requested indefinitely, I don't feel safe. What would help me is knowing that, there's a time duration to this, so I don't feel like it could go on for weeks, or so I can feel settled. That would really support me in feeling safe and being able to give you what you need, right? And then he has the option to show up or not. But I think, as I shared last time with you all, when I shared what space sort of emotionally did to me, he was much more sensitive to it. And it's like, Jen, I'm here, I'm going to take space, but I need time to process, because I was able to show up from a space of respecting what he needs, not making him bad or wrong for what he needs, or not trying to intervene and make it my way, right? That's one of the biggest things, is like that surrender, that ability to be with uncomfortable emotions and self-regulate. Okay, let's see. I'm looking at all of your questions here. Let's see. What about your partner? I have so many good questions. I want to make sure I don't get the ones that that you all emailed me. Oh, this is a great one. This is a really great one that I think will help everyone. At times I become more silent, noticing that I will not be heard by my spouse. When this happens, his energy starts to come towards me and he notices me more. I feel as if he prefers the chase. He may start to do things to show pursuit. I become happy with this connection and open up, and he starts to back away again. You said something in your last live which hit me, which was not to jump on the impulse of expressing ourselves and to actually sit with what we're feeling. Could you talk more about this, how to maintain groundedness while showing appreciation of his efforts so he's inspired to continue doing more? This is really interesting because it can be kind of like this eager beaver type of energy. Like, we're so happy that he's showing up that we like flood him with our excited, like overeager energy. And it then like causes him to pull back. And so a lot of this is that self-discipline I've been talking about so much, where you are really pacing yourself. Like, you don't have to, you don't have to do it all at once, right? You don't have to get everything out at once, but it's like that steadiness of recognizing why you want to share something. Like, what are you looking for? Are you looking for approval? Are you looking for validation? Are you just excited? Really filter and be clean with yourself so that when he does step in, you're still doing this sort of like lovely dance where you're allowing him to move towards you, and you're recognizing that less is more, and slow and steady is always the way to go. But sometimes in that eagerness, we shift the energy and then we flood him with even positive, intense emotions, right? It can like be too much at once. And so it's really that foundational component of recognizing that the feminine energy is about timing, and really understanding when your partner can hear you and when you're going to overwhelm them, and setting yourselves both up for success, right? And I think this is being able to recognize that, like, you can let go. You don't have to have it your way. It doesn't all have to play out a certain way in order for it to be right or good, and to allow him to step up so you can begin to kind of trust and rebuild through this filtration and through this awareness and the discipline that you're creating inside of yourself, right? Sometimes this is kind of an interesting question. What about when your partner just sits there when you cry or upset and doesn't say anything or show compassion? Crying sometimes can land like manipulation, depending upon the scenario, like right or wrong. It can land as manipulation sometimes, especially if it's like coming across in a way where you're expecting, it goes back to that expectation energy, where you're expecting someone to do something versus just kind of taking care of yourself and then expressing what you need from a clear state. I'm feeling really sad, or I'm feeling really distressed or upset. and only you know your dynamic, if he can receive this or not, but maybe asking for what would be helpful in that moment, or if he's kind of shut down or things are tense between the two of you, being able to take a little time to self-regulate and visit it later. Because definitely when like there's sort of that crying or really intense emotional sort of space that we're in, men don't always know what to do with that. And worst case, they can view it as manipulation and kind of shut down as a result of that. So just be mindful of that too. Let me see what else I have here. And it doesn't mean that you can't cry or be emotional either. It just means that you don't need him to show up a certain way as a result of you being upset. And later, when things are kind of calm between the two of you, you can say, sometimes like it's just such an emotional release for me to cry. And what would be helpful is X. What do you think? Right? Being able to then speak to what you need clearly. What do you think? And then notice the little ways in which he shows up and tries to make you happy. How can we be okay to be single if we have to be in this way for the rest of our life? Let's say we haven't got lucky to find the one. Well, I think that it's easy to, fall into sort of a lack mindset with this, right? Especially when we live in a society that encourages us to compare. I think that, future thinking generally increases anxiety. So you're more likely to go into overwhelm if you are thinking about, oh my gosh, what if this doesn't happen? Or, what if my whole life looks like this? And I really don't know. I don't believe that's going to serve anyone. Whereas, the idea of magnetism is creating that inner state that is so beautiful that we can't help but draw in who we are practicing being. And so, I know we've all talked about a gratitude practice before, but these things are higher vibrational. And so they really do begin to create new opportunities in your life. If you're operating your life from a lower state, you tend to attract, who you were being in that moment, which is like kind of like a lower frequency. But if we can recognize, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but this is where I am today, and really like hold that space for it, then we're in a very, very different position. And we're beginning to open ourselves up to possibilities that otherwise were never available to us. And so, past thinking leans us more into sadness, like, oh, what if I could have done better? What if I should have done this? Future thinking leads to stress, worry, overwhelm. Am I going to be able to handle it? How is like an anxiety provoking question in and of itself. Whereas if we're in the present moment and we're just showing up and we're focused on being the best person that we can be and taking opportunities where we can and stretching ourselves out of our comfort zone, it's about that trust and faith that what is meant for us will be for us. And staying on that path where you're quieting the noise and you're celebrating all of the gifts that are in your life right now, knowing that that doesn't mean you're settling. It means that you are magnetizing more good things into your life in the way in which they are meant to be, right? So that is truly a practice, right? Because that negative bias can creep in where we want to sort of protect ourselves. So, cultivating these feelings is a practice. It requires us to slow down and really think about where we are in space and time and how we're showing up for ourselves. I did get another question that I'm just going to kind of paraphrase. It was around, work, but I think work really relates to a lot of the stuff that we're talking about today too, in terms of the masculine and feminine. But it was about just really wanting this work opportunity and, not hearing back and all the anxiety building in that. Did they not like my work? Did they not like what I put out there? Oh my gosh, did I do a bad job? And starting to like turn on oneself in that time of uncertainty. And I think that this is also, I think we need to do like a live on discipline, because a lot of this does require that filtration of the ego, not going wild and thinking of all these scenarios of worst case scenarios, because a lot of this goes back to like the opening question around like staying true to what you're putting out there. Like even if one person benefits from this conversation and no one else does, it's about like surrendering that outcome and recognizing that I feel good about what I shared. And if it's not received by others in the same way, that's okay. I'm still moving towards what I want and where I want to be. And you're letting go of feeling like, you know, it their rejection has to lead to self-rejection. This is that discipline where if someone didn't like the proposal you submitted or the project that you did, that's okay, but it doesn't mean that you now reject yourself. And so you're keeping that ego in check, and you're remembering your worth and your value and your skill set, right? It may be very different than someone else's, and that doesn't mean that there isn't space or room for yours. And so a lot of this does go into self-soothing and really like not humoring hypotheticals, right? Like that's the biggest thing, where if you're the type of person that kind of panics in uncertainty and starts to think of a lot of stories and hypotheticals, it's really like, no, like I'm not going to humor that, right? It's not worth my time because I don't even know it to be true. And I deal with this a lot, like with women that I coach personally, right? Like, what if he's doing this, or what if this is going on? But we don't even know that to be true. So why are we spinning our wheels speculating on all the potential scenarios versus using that energy wisely and getting the focus back on ourselves, which reminds us of our value and worth, which in turn allows him to see our value and worth, right? So it's that practice of being really aware of what we're doing and some of our habits and calling ourselves out on it to do better and to not make up stories that we then react to, right? Because you will find that that in itself, just that practice alone of breaking up some of those patterns, is really life changing. And it just requires you to do it again and again and again. Let's see. Okay, so I'm going to read one longer question again. My current partner shows me a ton of affection, but when we are not together for a week or two, his communication becomes minimal and he doesn't respond to messages for a whole day or two. Sometimes he responds with little and doesn't initiate many phone calls. Just before this period, I visited him and the house wasn't clean. He had no necessities in the house, of just like in the fridge. And I felt a little hurt by that because I always do my best to make guests feel welcome. I did confront him about this, and he said it's something he's working on. He said he suffers from depression and has low days, which means he has no motivation to do anything. My question is, how do I put my triggers at ease and stop feeling resentful towards him during these situations and express concern without him feeling attacked or criticized? Okay, that's a great question. I think that, of course, as I've said before, the amount you're doing is usually correlated to the amount of resentment you feel. So if you're going all out of your way to make his life better, and then you find that he's not doing the same for you, it probably means that you might be, in that more overgiving space and giving to get in a subtle way, right? And so you want to make sure that when you do something, you're doing it from the heart, that because the cup is overflowing, not because like you're subtly expecting something in return. Although I think in this, scenario, I think it's reasonable to expect like the basics when you visit someone. But I think it goes back to what I was sharing earlier, where you're expressing from a space of not making the other person bad or wrong or assuming the absolute worst. So you'll notice that your instinct is always going to be the least generous sort of initial reaction to something. But then if you kind of catch that instinct and you don't react to it, you'll start to notice that like more generous possibilities begin to enter. And so as a general rule, instead of reacting, like get curious, like, hey, I'm really happy to be here. I'm so happy to see you and connect with you on this trip. Yet I just noticed that that things feel a little bit different in the space, or is everything okay? Like, I just want to check in and let you know I'm a good listener if there's anything you want to talk about, and just kind of stay open and see if you, as you approach something from a space of curiosity versus judgment or disappointment, what energy that begins to open up in the other person. Because when we approach something from, a more conscious space, or a space of more unconditional love and not assuming the worst, even if you're trying to hide it, they can feel the energy underneath it. Then you're opening up them to tell the truth and to disarm. So making sure that you open up that space, and then, later being able to communicate, I would love to, get a few of the basics for this trip. What do you think? And being able to express what you need to be comfortable in the space as well, right? Like making what you need a priority and setting you both up for success, because no one's going to be happy if some of those basics aren't met. And in this situation, that would be like not having the things that make a house comfortable when you're staying with someone, right? Like being able to set yourself up well so you are making yourself a priority, right? So I hope that is a helpful answer too. Let me see if there's anything else. Let's see. I have a lot in the chat. Oh my goodness. Let's see. I think that's everything. Let me make sure you're here too, because I had so many great questions. Let's see. How do you not give up hope and faith after so much disappointment and rejection? I think I spoke on this a little bit when I was answering the question about someone being single and just feeling like that could be it, right? I think it's about recognizing that too. I just want to say, with desires, you wouldn't want something terribly if it wasn't possible for you too, right? So it's like, there's a reason I'm not a veterinarian, right? I never really had that calling. And so I didn't put my energy towards it, and I didn't feel open to it, so I never took steps to study it. But a desire is a yearning that lives inside of us. And the desire becomes a pain point when our subconscious is saying that we can't have it. So there is a discrepancy between the high self knowing that a beautiful life is possible for us, and the sort of ego and subconscious saying, no, it's not. You can't have that. And so it creates a misalignment and a pain point. So a lot of it is like surrendering that, you wouldn't want, it wouldn't be on your radar if these things weren't possible for you. But if we're demanding it in a controlled manner, it has to be this guy, this place, this way, that's different. Like, we want to just surrender to what is meant to be for us, knowing that that can take many different shapes and forms. So if a woman is saying like, I will only be with this man only, that's kind of a demand. That's trying to control it. And it's almost like saying, I want this, yet I'm open to all possibilities for my highest good. And you just surrender to that truth that what's for your highest good is so possible for you. And you are neutralizing that limiting voice that is making this a painful process. And so this is a lot about that ego work, where we're recognizing the limiting belief. And maybe, we're not at the point where we can flip the limiting belief and say, yes, it is possible for us, but we just neutralize it. Maybe we just break it up through breath, and we clear out some of that resistance, and we take an opportunity to quiet the mind and then see what's possible, where we don't get that sort of talk back from the subconscious, and we start to neutralize and minimize that resistance, so we don't have like a battle going inside of our head fighting with ourselves, right? How do I operate from love and shift that state? And this really is the essence of masculine and feminine, right? Like, how do I show up in love with a level of consciousness versus agenda, right? How do I show up and lead from love versus what I want, the more self-gratifying, self-centered point of view, which we all fall into. But one can feel when we are leading from ego, which is that self-centered, self-gratifying point of view, versus when we're just like being open and we're doing the right thing and we're being in integrity and we are choosing to bite our tongue in the moments where we need to bite our tongue. We are choosing to wait till we're calm so we don't say something that we will regret later. We're choosing stillness versus the more willful sort of, response or reaction. We're making those tough choices and building that inside of us. So ultimately a man can feel safe with us, because if we're emotionally all over the map and we're just like kind of saying and doing whatever we feel, well, he's probably not going to feel very emotionally safe. And that is one of the most critical components to building intimacy. So with men, that emotional safety is everything. Are you a woman who can take care of herself, who can be with difficult emotions without putting them on other people, who can get clarity and, feel solid before she responds? Can you sit with something difficult? Can you set boundaries? Can you love yourself more versus, prioritizing him and over investing in him when the ask really is for you to show up for yourself? All of these things are going to be leading from love and create the energy of a man feeling really emotionally safe around you, because you love yourself and you know who you are, and you're not going to put it on him and blame him for the things going on in life that feel hard. And so this will allow him to bring his walls down and open up more and more to you. But a man closes off when he feels like he's dealing kind of with like a firecracker, or he doesn't know what version of you he's going to get that day. And so it's about making sure that we're creating that emotional safety within ourselves, so we learn to feel safe, which means widening the bandwidth of what we can feel, and that we invite him to witness that. Doesn't mean we have to be in a good mood all the time or this like tap dancer, right? It just means that we can be with our emotions without taking them out, taking them on another person, or playing kind of a game of hot potato with them. It's really beautiful, and it is, to me, the most important component to building true, lasting intimacy. So I hope that is supportive. I think that's it for today. I'm going to go, but we will continue this conversation. If you all have any more questions or even, topics from this that you would love for me to go deeper into, I'll do another live in a few weeks. And I always take your feedback in. So please feel free to share if something is really speaking to you. And thank you so much for being here. I'll post this shortly on my channel for those of you that couldn't be here live too. Much love.